But are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, we're seeing your screen, and so is everybody else.
Is it the blue, is it the presentation screen though? Or is it the black screen? Because I can't see what I'm showing.
I don't know what to tell you.
Let's just do a window. That's what we want to show.
There it is.
There it is. Okay.
And hello, Miss Billy. I heard you earlier, so.
Just so you know, everybody can hear us, so. When Jennifer hit the start button, that opened the microphone so everybody can hear us.
Okay.
We have no secrets.
Hi, James.
James, you're muted.
Maybe having the same issues I was at first. I'm just going to test out my camera for a second.
Looks good.
Okay, we got her. James, you're still muted if you don't have, if you can hear that.
Hi, James.
Oh, there he goes. He's unmuted now.
How about now?
Gotcha.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Glad we both had the same issues. I had to break out a second computer for mine, so.
Get started in about 3 minutes. In about a minute, I'll do the housekeeping and then turn this over to you guys. So just bear with me for a couple minutes.
No problem.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome to APA's weekly webinar. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager, Special Projects for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to APA's webpage later this afternoon. You'll receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the webpage where all recordings are housed, as well as links to our upcoming webinars. We have webinars planned out through the end of 2021 and are open for registration. Professional continuing education and AIA CLU credits are being offered to today's program. If you're an AIA professional requiring a certificate, please send an email to me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, at APA.org, along with your AIA membership number if you have not done so in the past. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by one of our presenters. If you are just calling in, make sure you send an email to me at Billie@APA.org to let me know so I can add you to the certificate list if you requested one. The system only recognizes you if you log in. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to James Bowers and Don Holloway. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Billy. We appreciate you having us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about the 3 things that you need to know about ASME and IBC code updates and how they affect the emergency communications of your elevators. My name is James Bowers, Product Specialist for Kings 3 Emergency Communications. I've been with Kings 3 for 17 years in roles ranging from emergency dispatch, product management, project management, installation and service, and most recently moving into the product specialist role, where I focus primarily on ASME 2019 and IBC 18 code compliant elevator communications. I also have Don Holloway with me today. I'll let him introduce himself and get us started.
How you doing? My name is Don Holloway. Again, as James says, thank you all for letting us present to you and give you some information and updates on the code that's coming out. My name is Don Holloway. As I said, I'm with Kings Free Field Service Manager. I'm also the Elevator Program Manager. I've been in the elevator trade 20 plus years. I carry elevator inspector's license. I sit on the ASME code committee for electrical code, as well as carrying about 27 different licenses across the country. Most of the stuff that I've done has been in the elevator and communication field as well. Today, what we're going to try and do with everybody, on our next slide, we're going to start seeing the code changes, as James mentioned. What is our current requirements? Current requirements: a hands-free device, two-way communication between the elevator and authorized personnel, on-site communication over 60-foot or rise, answered 24/7 live with the personal one, with the authorized personnel only, and no automated answering. That's the simple stuff. On the next one, we continue with the current requirements. We're location identification. We're going to need on-demand from authorized personnel without voice communication, automatic answering when the elevator calls into the elevator, automatically redirect with no answer on site, off-site communication, and local line status monitoring. On the next section, on the next slide, we're going to go through the beginning of what we've got. As we stated, this is going to be the updates of what the 2018 and the 2021 difference between the IBC, International Building Code, and also we're going to go over the A17.1. Taking a look at the code here, what we've got, I wanted to kind of give a brief overview before we go into some of the fine points. All throughout this time and year, we've been dealing with all of these Zoom meetings, webinars, and things like this. We've all got quite frequent with it. That's the best way to kind of break this down, to give it a simplistic look, kind of a 60,000-foot view, and then I'll go into some of the finer points of the code here. Let's take a look and process, say, a Zoom meeting or any meeting that we're on here. Me and James, we're all sitting here getting ready to talk. Well, if I'm sitting here, we don't have a camera on, but I'm sitting and talking, you can't hear me. Well, obviously you're going to be yelling into the mic, hey, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. The next thing you're going to do is chat and type and say, hey, look, your mic's not on. If you see me on the video and you see me talking, you're going to refer to the same thing. Speak in, can you hear me? Can you also use your text message and say, hey, look, Don, your mic's on. I can see you talking, but nothing's coming out. This code basically is an extension of that exact same thing. They're given the ability to give the operators and the people that are talking to them that extra point of communication. 2018 IBC came out with an emergency two-way communication shall be provided that is a visual and text-based, video-based 24/7 live interactive system. Also is fully accessible by the deaf, hard of hearing, speech impaired, and shall include voice-only option for hearing individuals. It has the ability to communicate with the emergency personnel utilizing existing video technology, conference technology, chat, text software, or other approved technology. This kind of was evasive and kind of broad. So in the 2021, they cleaned that up a little bit. An emergency two-way communication shall provide the system. What it's going to do here is, when operating in each mode, include a live interactive system that allows the back and forth conversation between the elevator occupants and emergency personnel. 2 is operational when the elevator is operational, and 3 allows elevator occupants to select text-based or audio mode depending on the communication needs to interact. That cleaned everything up. It gave it a better base for understanding. It's looking to just communicate to see if someone's talking. The first year when it came out, it kind of confused and made you think that you actually had a live two-way conversation like we're doing now. That's not what it's wanting to do. It's wanting to actually be able to see if someone's in the cab. And we'll explain that later along the code. The next slide, what we're going to start with here is, this is the 2019 code update for the ASME. What I'm going to do, we've all know how codes and everything like that goes. we have highlighted in here the additions, and that addition is very important because this code change is an addition to the code, not a subtraction. So the current code is existing and it stays for what you currently have. The blue is going to be an addition to that. So let's go through this briefly and then we'll kind of sum up each one of the sections as it goes so it doesn't get too boring for everybody. We like to try not to keep everybody, falling asleep during this. On the first section, we notice that who can take appropriate action. The next, they added in the different code books that this will be related to from the ADA accessibility guidelines and such. Also, the communication means shall be initiated when the push button is actuated. On the next slide, we're going to explain what does this mean. The person answering the phone needs to be able to take appropriate action. The call button must initiate a call. This is rocket science, right? No. Just think of it as ridiculous warning labels on every product that you've got. It's a simple explanation of what you know is already there. On the next slide here, we're going to see the other clarifications. Now we're seeing a message must be displayed, and it's permitted to be extinguished where necessary to display a new message. On the next portion, on the same panel as the phone push button, the message shall be displayed, which permits authorized personnel to communicate with and obtain responses from passengers, including passengers who cannot verbally communicate. The next slide, we're going to continue with that. And on the same panel as the phone push buttons, the message, it's basically a repeat of the same thing. What does this mean? Elevators must have the ability for authorized personnel to send messages to as well as receive responses. Depending on the manufacturer, you can have a push button that answers yes or no, or it could be an actual button that says yes or no, or a button that's associated with the door open or door close button. Change them to go into that in detail as well. Next portion. We're going to look at the section that says a means to display video to observe passengers at the location of the car floor to authorized personnel for entrapment assessment shall be provided. What does this mean? The elevator must have the ability for the authorized personnel to view the entire floor of the cab. Basically, they want them to be able to see if someone's passed out. So if they press the button, but no one's talking, they can load the video and say, is someone stuck? Is the microphone or something not working? Is the person hearing impaired and they can't speak? Do we need to do the text base? So it gives them more knowledge of what's going on rather than just guessing. On this next slide, we're going over this portion is a 2.271.14. The distinguish of this is the first line where the elevator rise is 18 meters or 60 feet or more. This is what is used for high-rise elevators, anything that has what's currently people would call a master station or a lobby phone, where you can communicate with the elevator and the lobby itself. The additions to this code is the clarification of stating emergency personnel, and it must be permitted to communicate means with the emergency personnel, and emergency was added. This is emergency personnel is people that's on site. The code has two words, authorized personnel and emergency personnel. Emergency personnel are your firemen, your on-site personnel, your maintenance, your security. They're going to be the emergency personnel that's going to be responding to the elevator. Authorized personnel is who you are talking to outside when you make that first call. On the next point, we're going to clarify once the communication has been established, the message shall be displayed. This is a repeat of the first code. Necessarily, that means, why is this important? Currently, many elevators have a light to indicate the help is on the way. The new indicator shall provide clarity and additional assurances to the entrapped passengers. What this also means is if it's a 60-foot rise or above, the panel must also do the same ability of having text-based and video ability as well. On to the next section on the same panel. As you read the same thing, we've got the same explanation on the same panel to the emergency personnel to communicate with the responses from trapped personnel. Why is this important? This provides additional support for those passengers who are speech and hearing impaired. The next slide, it also states that a means to display video to observe passengers at any location. Again, this is a repeat of the same code because it stipulates that you must have the same ability for the emergency personnel that the authorized personnel have. A video feed into the cab provides emergency personnel additional information to better assess the situation. This includes verifying whether a passenger is unconscious, simply nonverbal, or perhaps the call is a false alarm. When your fire department or your rescue personnel comes in, they can actually look into the cab, talk to the people, and say, okay, is someone injured? What do they need to prepare for the rescue or such? On the next slide here, this is James going to take it away on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Okay, so this table summarizes what Don just went over, shows the evolution of ASME A17.1 from the year 2000 to 2019. If you look at the bottom, you'll see there are 3 lines have been added to accommodate the hearing and/or speech impaired. The two-way messaging device, a means for authorized personnel to view inside the cab, and a means activated by emergency personnel to change the cab message to indicate help is on the way when you do have more than 60 feet of travel. So that goes back to the master station equipment that Don was referring to. When you are over that 60 feet of travel, you do have to have the on-site capability to view the camera feed and change the message inside the car. All of this information is also detailed and outlined in our website, which is keens3.com. So now that we know what the code says, how does the system work? So here's essentially what you're going to need to get an elevator online to meeting the new code. So the emergency phone we're all familiar with, it still exists and is what initiates initial contact with authorized personnel, meeting the person answering the call. The new code mandates additional components in order to be compliant, which include the in-cab camera, which has to be dedicated solely for the purpose of emergency communications, and then the messaging screen, which also has to be solely dedicated to this system. The reason I mention that is because I get a lot of questions fielded regarding digital signage, digital marketing screens, and security cameras, things of that nature. Those cannot be incorporated into the system at this time. They do have to be a standalone camera and messaging screen just dedicated for this purpose. Next, you're going to need a secure internet connection for the video and texting feed. This is in addition to the standard phone line that you would have for your voice communications. One thing I want to mention when you are deciding on fixture companies to purchase this ASME 19 compliant hardware from, it's important to choose a compliant system that will integrate with a variety of manufacturers. Think of it like buying Apple versus Android. When you're buying an Apple product, you're limiting yourself to only iOS platforms and applications provided by Apple. So with a video monitoring system, you don't want a service agreement with someone that you can't get out of because they have installed proprietary monitoring equipment. So now think about Android. That you have the freedom to use any service, application, platform that is Android-based and is on the open market. It's the same with the open source video monitoring hardware. The point is that the customer should not or should be able to change service companies if they're not happy with the service, and we don't want the proprietary monitoring equipment keeping you from being able to do that. So next, I've got a diagram here that'll show you how the system is actually laid out and wired on site. So if you start in the box labeled elevator machine room, you'll see that there's a box labeled machine room box. So this is where the video and text manufacturers are placing the backup battery power as well as the Ethernet switch for the internet connection. You'll notice that I put a picture of an antenna and a WAN or wide area network port. This is to show you that you have options for getting that data connection, that internet connection to the elevator. One being the wired Ethernet connection that we talked about. Another one being a cellular device that provides the cellular data to transmit the video and text messaging. So then leaving the machine room, you'll see an 18-gauge shielded pair connecting the machine room to the elevator. So this brings up a point that seems to be a significant concern to contractors and elevator people who are getting into building these elevators. The question is how do we get internet into the elevator? So the good news is that this box, this machine room box, the manufacturers are installing a device that breaks down the internet connection into a 2-wire signal, meaning that you can hook up a standard 18-gauge travel cable from your standard travel cable bundle without having to add any additional Ethernet or Cat5, Cat6 wiring. So then on the left side of the screen, inside the elevator, you'll see the car operating panel, and this is where the messaging display is going to be. In some cases, you'll see yes and no buttons for the passenger to answer the questions that are being asked by authorized personnel on the text format. Depending on the manufacturer, you're either going to have dedicated yes and no buttons, or they may have assigned the door open and door close buttons to perform the same function. The last component, if you look at the center of the screen, is the communications failure device. So if anybody has installed an elevator that meets anything higher than ASME 2010, then you're already installing this device. And basically what it does is it detects phone line voltage, and anytime that voltage drops, it will close a relay that then sounds a buzzer and flashes a light indicating they have lost voice communication inside the cab. So now we can walk through what a call would look like when it does reach our emergency dispatch center. So when a passenger presses the phone button, the call is placed to the emergency operator. This is a screen of what the operator's workstation will look like. If you look at the screen on the left, they have the account information and the alarm information for this particular elevator. And then the screen on the right, you'll see they have the view of the camera feed, as well as a text box where they can type in their messages to receive the yes and no responses from the passenger. Then at that point, if there's no response to verbal communication, the operator then uses the video stream to confirm this, if there's a passenger in the car. If there is a passenger present and has not responded verbally, the emergency operator will then begin nonverbal communication by posting messages to the in-car screen. And like I said, they will be able to answer those questions using either yes and no buttons, or as you can see here, it clearly shows the door open and door close buttons as those options to answer those questions. At this point, if there's still no response and there's visual confirmation of a passenger, the emergency operator would then dispatch the appropriate emergency personnel. So lastly, I'll just go over a few best practices when it comes to emergency phone monitoring. The dispatch center needs to ensure entrapment calls are handled by highly trained personnel in a consistent manner and are recorded with a date and time stamp, as well as being responded to in multiple languages. And then lastly, a couple of training issues that we would like to take note of is answering and dispatch issues are typically the result of a non-emergency personnel handling these duties. And then as far as the hardware and installation goes, those issues are generally related to a lack of training and technical support. So now I'll turn it back over to Don and he can recap and close this out.
What we got here, the elevator, what we're going to do is basically like James said, everything he explained, the basic recap on this is going to be, one, we're going to need to include two-way messaging capability for those who are hearing and speech impaired. Two, include video capability. And three, display message, not just a light, to indicate call has been received and help is on the way or on site. And here on the next slide, what you're going to see is these, and one of the biggest questions, like James was saying, that comes into, especially during this process, when does this rule apply to me? This code will only apply to elevators permitted for construction or modernization alteration after the code is adopted by the state where the elevator is located. It will not impact existing elevators which are not undergoing modernization. Remember, ASME does not enforce code. Individual states have adopted ASME as their standard and self-selector timeline for adoption. To find out what code that you're under or required as your state, we do have a link on here for our website that will give you that breakdown for each one of the states. On the next slide, we've given just a quick overview. This is a ever-growing list and ever-changing, but we have some of the listings here of states that have adopted the 2019 and the IBC 2018. And again, as you noticed, they're both compliant. The 2018 is before the adoption of the 2019. So if you are on the IBC 2018, you'll be there. This is just a small list on here. And again, it can always change. We just wanted to kind of give you guys a rough shot of how many states are out there now. And again, thank you very much for letting us present to you. Hopefully we didn't put you guys to sleep too much. And if you have any questions or anything, just let us know. Our contact information is here. Again, I'm Don Holloway, and James is right here to give his closeout as well. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and we have some time here now as well, guys. If you have any questions you want to enter into the chat box, we've got some time. We can feel free to ask those and we'll answer them as we can.
Okay, we have some questions coming in. One of the questions that I have for you, gentlemen, is what happens with the with codes and standards when you build a new building and the inspector comes in? How do you deal, or how do you keep up to date with all the latest information from all these code changes?
What we do as far as Kings 3 is we stay up to date with each of the individual states. Myself and also our president and CEO actually sit on code committees. And we have another gentleman with us that sit on code committees throughout the year. So we know what the newest code updates are that come out. We keep in contact with the chief bureau elevators, such as North Carolina. We have a good relationship with the people of North Carolina. They are one of the first that adopted and kept up with it. So we reach out and keep a constant contact with all local chiefs and bureaus to make sure what their changes, when their adoptions are, and try to keep that information going out to our clients and on our website as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like we're getting a lot of questions about the recording and PowerPoint for later. And everyone will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and where to download the slides. As soon as James and Don send a copy to me, I'll make that available. We have a question. What is the typical financial impact to an elevator remod due to the new code changes?
Do you want to take that one, James? I know that there's some different monetary values that we've dealt with.
Yeah, so Kings 3 as a company, we had to sit down and plan how we were going to handle this new code requirement. And what we've decided as a company is that we're not going to get into the hardware business when it comes to the messaging device and the camera. So what we're doing is we're doing our best to do what we do best, which is monitoring emergency phones. So my job is to make sure that we're compatible and figure out how to get basically any device that is installed. Now, remember what I mentioned about the non-proprietary equipment. We do have issues there. But any open source non-proprietary system, we want to be able to monitor that. So to get back to your question regarding the cost, we're not really involved in the plans of building this type of car operating panel or this type of elevator. Really what we offer is the monitoring at a monthly fee. So to answer your question, I don't really have a solid answer for how much or what we're looking at financially when installing one of these cabs, and what the difference would be between this type of elevator and the typical voice-only communication. So unfortunately, I really don't have good figures for you on that.
And as James said, that also can be configured. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, go ahead, Don. I apologize.
Just a quick donor, just like James said, these things are also going to be included in your modernization or alteration or new install. So that price will also be figured in. It's not going to be in addition to. So it may increase the price for the modernization or the installation, because all integrated at that point. So that will kind of be all packaged up. You won't have to pay your modernization, and this is a separate deal. They'll all be kind of combined.
Okay. Next question. Does the IBC 2018 edition require the text, video monitoring, and 24-hour operating monitoring?
It does. As I stated in the 2018, and that's a great question and a great clarification, because there are a great many confusion that, hey, I'm not adopted in 2019, but we're on the 2018. That is, the 2018 is where the 2019 made its code from. 2019 IBC does trigger the need for that. So, and it also again breaks down to your state. There may be the state where they have adopted these codes, but they're also not enforcing that code, and that could be state by state adoption. But when you do have the 2018, it is code required that you have that as well during the construction.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question. Are there code changes that apply to elevators less than 60-foot rise?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah, the same thing on that one. The 60-footer rise is listed in there. We list that because you have to have that secondary communication, because not only do you have the emergency communication for the elevators, that is whether it's 2-stop, whether it's 3-stop, or whether it's 32 stops. The addition of the 60-footer rise that we like to label in there is because that means you have to have an additional device that does the same thing as the authorized personnel device that's currently in there as well.
Right. So just to clarify, yes, if the elevator falls under this code, then you do have to have the video and texting capability, regardless of the number of floors or the number of feet of rise. The 60 feet of rise just adds that additional component that has to be on site and perform the same function of viewing the video and updating the messages.
Okay, thank you. Our next question. Will the elevator manufacturer be incorporating the required hardware, such as voice only or audio visual, additional required equipment?
They are. So this is being built at the fixture level. So your elevator company purchases the equipment from a fixture company who draws the plans, designs the cab, and puts whatever features and hardware required into that. That's all going to be done on the front side of the modernization from the fixture company. So that equipment is included in a modernization when it is required.
Okay, well, that seems to be, hopefully that answered everyone's questions. We seem to be out of questions. Again, your information is on the slides. I'm sure everyone will be reaching out to you. So I will have certificates out to everyone shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a half hour back of their time. So gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time to do this today. We truly appreciate this. And to our attendees, as always, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.